Hello everyone. My name is Sascha Bailey. I've been working with emerging artists and established artists for the last 8 years. I've worked with over 20 artists, 10 of which who I work with quite closely. Curated about 15 shows in the UK and Tokyo. And for the last year, I've been working on a project called the Blockchain Art Exchange. And what this project aims to do is bring forth better autonomy for all artists, utilizing the Ethereum blockchain and blockchain technology. So first of all, what are crypto collectibles? We've had a little bit of this tonight already, but in the world we essentially have two types of assets. We've got fungible and non-fungible. Fungible being US dollars, Bitcoin, Ethereum. Non-fungible being things like classic cars, titles to houses, and artwork. But for the last 60 years, since the kind of digital revolution, art's been on the fence between tangible and intangible. And it hasn't really had a truly compelling means of exchanging it in the intangible realm. So how does actually crypto art work? So there's 4 major parts that go into crypto art, and there's a little bit of misconception of how much of NFTs are actually on the blockchain. So first of all, of course, we have the blockchain itself, which is a registry. It tells us where things are, how much they cost, where they're going next, why they cost that much, etc. Then we've got a server, which is actually to store the large files themselves. Moving towards a distributed service like the IPFS is the end goal, but we currently use AWS for latency and security concerns. Then you've got Web3 browsers. A lot of you will be familiar with this sort of stuff. So MetaMask, Trust Wallet, that sort of thing that actually allows you to interact with the smart contracts on the websites. Then finally, there's something that isn't talked about very much, which is a token URI. And this has become the industry standard for displaying metadata on websites using the blockchain. So what this essentially is a URL that's input into the token that when called returns a JSON blob of information that gives you your image, name, description, etc. So what is it actually solving for artists right now? First of all, it reduces marginal cost. This is because it's simply you're just uploading to the blockchain. You only need the image that you've already created, and you're good to go. You don't have transport, you don't have insurance, you don't have any of those things to worry about. Secondly, it introduces a new demographic, and what I mean by this is it allows artists to reach directly with consumers rather than hitting the filter of gallerists, dealers, and critics. It sorts out the means of exchange. This especially affects video artists. At the moment, if you buy a piece of video work, more than likely you'll receive it on a disc or a USB stick, and it will come along with a contract that makes you promise you will not copy this. And that's not so much of a problem the first time you buy it, it becomes a problem when you try and resell it onto someone else, because you'll have a hard time promising someone that you haven't copied this onto a disk or burnt it before selling it on. It also allows us to create interesting ways of creating royalties. A lot of platforms do this in all different ways, but it allows us to hardwire this into the way that art's transacted. There is actually a European law that enforces there's supposed to be royalties paid back to artists, but pretty much the only country that really does it is Germany. Then finally, it secures global IP, which is just a piece of distributed ledger technology, kind of what it does. Once you've uploaded it there, you've obviously timestamped it as your creation. And as I said, the artists who are really being affected by this in a positive way right now are the ones who work in a digital space already. And that brings me to my next slide. So one of the problems that Photoshop artists always kind of encounter is working within different light spectrums. So within RGB, which is typically what you create on a screen, you've got a much wider spectrum than CMYK, which is what you typically print in. So when an artist goes to take their work from RGB to CMYK, they're losing a lot of the vibrancy. And a lot of artists don't like this. They're confused as to why their print doesn't look the same on the screen as it does in real life. So all of this leads us to, we've got fantastic new ways of interacting with digital art, which amounts to really a new industry stack. So we've got things like AR. It's hard-pressed to find an AR demonstration from Microsoft which doesn't contain some form of digital art. Alongside this, we've got projects like CryptoVoxels and Decentraland creating VR experiences which really give us a compelling look into how social media might look in the future and how we might interact with each other in a 3D space. Finally, there's the Samsung Art Screen TVs, which almost just fatedly kind of came out at the same time as the crypto collectibles market. And then finally, third-party exchanges, which are really important because the magic in this new industry isn't the fact that you can buy digital art and own it on our platform. It's the fact that you can take it and sell it wherever you want. It's really yours. It provides true buyer autonomy in the fact that you can take it like a real artwork and sell it to whoever you wish. So Afro New Generation. Now this is an artist who we found and worked with. He's an Indonesian artist called Leonardo Vincent. And what's really interesting about this is normally when we're trying to work with a new artist who we discover, I've got to call them, I've got to get stuff shipped over, I've got to get stuff printed, there's a lot of marginal cost involved. However, now we can send a few emails and we can be working together in a matter of minutes. So this artist actually created a work which I think is quite interesting. Is a rendition of the recent online battle that happened between PewDiePie and T-Series. T-Series was going to be the first PewDiePie was going to be the first individual to make it to 100 million. T-Series was going to beat him. The last minute, Elon Musk came onto his show and essentially, figuratively, lifted him up in subscribers. So this is a work that was created for that. As bizarre as it may sound, I really think that this has quite a lot of cultural relevance, as art should. That video shouldn't play. So all of this amounts to growing better artist autonomy. Now, when we look at the different industries, which all really heavily rely on artistic input, individually they're quite small. But when we look at it all together, if artists can grant access and move between with clear licensing and easy ways, then they get access to a $700 billion market. Now, to give an example of how this might work, is you imagine you have a clothing designer who's a student. They come along and they upload a group of their designs to the blockchain, to our exchange. Then you have another company, a video game company, who's looking for clothing for their characters to wear. They discover this, and that interaction couldn't have happened unless they have this centralized place where they can all explore. They discover this clothing designer, and they decide that they want to use that art in their game for their creations. Now, this can happen in both ways, and it's not just the only example. I mean, you can apply this to jewelry designers and painters. The other interesting thing that we solve in this industry, and we can work towards solving, is the two different types of artists earning different amounts. So if you go towards concept art, you can earn a decent living, as you usually receive a wage, but you won't be able to ever privately sell your work. And if you're a painter, you generally only privately sell your work, and the payment isn't so regular. It's here and there whenever you can sell something. So with this platform, we can allow people to cross industries rather than having to specialize in one field of art. They can move between the two, and they have access to all of them. So this brings me into here, this is an artist which we were working with called Zarlin Art. She traditionally produced concept art and hadn't thought about doing much fine art. But as we work together and as we kind of push her in the direction of we can use this platform, you really have the freedom to do what you want, the work produced is really interesting and quite compelling from someone who comes from a very you do what I say sort of background. So now getting on to actually our project. So what makes the BAE different from other art projects in the industry? Well, first of all, we're an archive. All the art on our platform is treated as an archive. We have a digital standard process, which I'll go through, which essentially is a grading process for digital art on objective values. We've got an algorithm which helps decide starts to decide a starting price, but as we moved into a project, we decided that this would be an optional thing rather than something we forced on people, because people don't tend to like that. Finally, we've got a royalties fee, which comes into a unique token economy. So the way our royalties fees works is you're rewarded the more you sell on the platform. So the more you sell with us, the more money you'll receive, and this is taken from a percentage of the sales. And what we want to do with this eventually, and what we can do with this, is use this to slowly move the blockchain art exchange towards a DAO. So this is the process that we kind of know we're quite familiar with so far. We get up to the point that we're logging the creation on the Ether blockchain. And the two processes I'm going to go into today is our digital standard and then our sales process. I'm not going to talk about licensing because I don't really have enough time. I think sales is a little bit more interesting and lighter too. So first of all, our standard and where we got the inspiration from. Something you'll notice about non-fungible real-world items is they all have attributes like this. I mean, diamonds is obviously one of the most extreme examples, but physical art has condition reports and provenance reports. Classic cars have condition reports. So we got a team of experts together with 10 years in the field, knowing how to scan, how to grade videos, knowing really what makes something objectively good. And we created something we call the BAE standard. So one of the major problems, and this goes back to the RGB slide that I was talking about before, is if someone sends me an artwork from around the world and I've never seen it in person, how do I know that it's the right color? And this is actually kind of a problem if you're going to be scanning physical artwork and archiving it. So after we tried a few different things, tried to get printers to print the exact same shade of a color, that's never going to happen, we eventually settled on something called a gray card, which is generally used in photography to calibrate cameras, but can also be used as a reference point that everyone knows is the same color. Because that's, in the end, what we need to do. We need to identify something objectively that's the same no matter what. So after we know that this is archived and this is the same color, this, by the way, this is all done manually right now. We are building a data set so that we can start allowing computers to automate this, but we need to build that up first, so it's going to be a manual process for a while. So after we grade it, we have a look at the artwork's DPI, or PPI. Now this is relative to the actual size the artwork is originally. In this case, the artwork has over 600, which is generally pretty good, so we'd give that an A grade. Then finally, the file type is checked. And this is super important because you don't want an archive with something like a JPEG, because every time you resave a JPEG, you lose a little bit of quality. So we went for TIFFs or bitmaps are generally the best quality for archiving artwork. There are other options, but we didn't really look into vector files. It wasn't something interesting from our perspective. So finally, that goes into a certificate of authenticity, which is great. And then there's one other piece on here that you might notice, which is prints. This essentially is a way of tracking the prints created from a digital item in the physical world. So it's almost like a reverse editioning thing. So just going to go quickly, our token economy and sales process, just to give you a really brief overview of how this works. So someone would upload artworks to BAE, know what happens there. And the first time it sales, this artist who sold it is rewarded with a small amount, animation works, a small amount of BAE tokens, and also, of course, the Ethereum from the sale. But every time something sells, the BAE token holders receive a small amount of Ethereum. And the only way to become a BAE token holder is to sell on the platform. This prevents people from monopolizing the tokens or trying to buy in too early and prevents whale-like activities, or at least helps to prevent it. So again, resellers and dealers can also earn BAE tokens by reselling the artwork. So these are this is like the sectors of neo-art. It's like a Venn chart I did of kind of all of the research I put together of pretty much everyone in the space. I don't call it crypto art simply because there is a couple of projects here which actually aren't blockchain related at all. Everyone kind of started out in one of these circles and slowly moved towards another, and that's what this is kind of showing, is that no one really knows what this industry is going to be yet. It's evolving constantly and it's changing. So thank you so much for listening. I've been Sascha Bailey. I hope that I gave you a good understanding of what we do, where digital art is, and why digital art is kind of important for art in general. There's a QR code up there right now, which will take you directly to our storefront. Please let me know if you have any questions. Anyone? No? Oh, okay.
Questions? Let's see if you can shout out for anything this.
That was a good presentation, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Is the BAE token a ERC20?
Yes, it is, but it doesn't really hold intrinsic value. It's more just like a marker of how much each person holds. So we could use it for voting systems, we could use it for that, but at the moment it's really just a marker of how many artworks you've sold, essentially. Yeah? Oh.
Hi. So being a musician, I actually worked a lot with royalty systems and platforms like that in France especially, which is roughly the same as Germany in terms of redistributions and tracking and payment and stuff like that for artists. The main problem, because it's not the first project I see in art in general and in music and digital rights and stuff like that. The problem is adoption. So what are you doing about adoption? How are you contacting all those not regulatory bodies, but you know what I mean, like SACEM in France and etc. The various bodies like that in the music industry, or which also vertical.
Yeah.
We are targeting first, and why? How are you bridging the gap between digital to physical? Because at some stage, those guys are doing something, that is tangible. They always like to have the art, which is a lot palpable.
Yeah.
And moving towards digital is difficult. I know because I also work with a bunch of guys called Iconic in Russia, and they have about 1,000 artists that deals specifically in digital art, so you could connect to that. We can talk later.
Okay, well, definitely. So the first question was, what are we doing to kind of push adoption? How are we doing that? So we're pushing the angle that basically, I don't believe that the technology is really what's going to sell this. I don't really think the platforms are what's going to sell it. In the end, it's going to be the artists. So what I do is I work closely with artists. That's what I've always done. So my goal is to push it forward through them. So I think that when someone starts using this technology for really compelling and amazing things, and obviously there's all these great things that it does, but when someone really starts utilizing that and gets into it, I think that's when we start to see things happen. It's about the creators rather than what we've created, essentially. And then, sorry, what was the second part of your question?
Can I clap for that?
Oh, well, thank you. What was the second part of your question, sorry?
The adoption.
The adoption. So again, I feel like it's getting the right artists with the right groups who are interested in this, building up influencer spheres, building up people who want to talk about it and want to get involved with digital art. And you're right, it's an incredibly difficult onboarding process because we're not only onboarding people to the platform and the concept, we're also onboarding people to the artists themselves. So that's why I think it's almost better, like I said, to kind of target through influencer groups such as artists.
Yeah, so rebounding on that, I hope you guys don't mind. The other thing is, for example, I've got 3 paintings at home, which I pay, whatever, let's say £500 each. Today, I have no clue what they're worth, but I know because I've got friends that are artists that they're all in a special book, like a Bible of painters, where all the prices are somewhere, and those guys understand how it works. I just don't. I've got them at home. I don't know what they're worth.
Yeah.
So how can you change that, and how do you bridge the gap as well on that database?
So
I still don't remember the name of this.
So we don't actually, Blockchain Art Exchange, we don't actually work with physical art all that much. Like, I mean, I do personally, but the platform's very much focused on digital only. So one of the great things about using, blockchain with purely digital stuff is there's not any input for humans. So it's always on there. There's no choice but the provenance to be tracked. So I think that's what you're asking. Just how do you make sure that you keep a record?
You need to have I can't find the word in English. Usually there is a database that gives you the quotation of each artist.
Yeah, it's called a catalogue raisonné.
Thank you.
And it's a document that contains basically a comprehensive list of all the artists' works. It doesn't normally contain price, although it sometimes contains historic sale prices. But it's usually produced by somebody as part of a PhD in terms of researching the history of that artist, and becomes the sort of go-to body and authority on whether those works are authentic and whether they're actually by that artist. And so normally in a sales process, one would consult the catalogue raisonné, normally via a dealer. Most people don't do that themselves. But that is what provides you with information that you can then use to sell it. And that's normally done in conjunction with a number of online databases which have historic sales prices of comparable artworks and artists that you can sort of triangulate a suggested price.
So this is how today's industry have got together to create this business process in order to create a market. Now back at you, how does that work within the digital world? Is it just for all organic growth?
I think in the digital world, like I said, I mean, the fact is you don't really necessarily need that book when literally everything is on the blockchain, because you can look back and you can actually see the transactions from that moment that digital artwork went on there. Prior to actually blockchaining it, that's something else, but we're generally talking about contemporary art that's been made now with our platform. It's not so much about working out what someone's done before, as in making sure that we go forward with this new process.
Yeah,
Thank you.